We thought it was just midnight, but it is 2 in the morning where Brian is coming to us from. Brian, first of all, thank you for either waking up or staying up. We really super appreciate that.
No, I didn't stay up. I set an alarm.
So welcome to the 12th annual Toronto Beaches Film Festival. Did you ever think that your life as a foil surfer was going to be documented?
Well, that's an interesting question, right? Because when you don't know the outcome, you could be taking a bit of a risk, putting yourself out there, filming a failure, I guess. And that was a question we asked ourselves.
Our challenge right now is they getting the kite in the air on the beach.
We said at the very beginning that it wasn't something we needed to do in order to achieve our objective, but at the same time, we justified the filming of it by saying that it would be good to show other people and share our experience with people who weren't there on the day.
It's an incredible feat. So now I will spoil alert. Record-breaking double crossing of Cook Strait by kitefoil. I mean, that's incredible. How much of it was planned and undone because it's all about the weather?
It took us a good 2 years of waiting and, setting up the logistics, which isn't something to say that, you only get a weather window that rarely. It's quite common that the conditions are right. And some misconception that we wanted to show was, even though this body of water has a reputation for being, very turbulent or violent, dangerous at times, it can often be just a relatively calm day's sailing. So to answer your question, when you have to get somewhere, we had to get special permission to get access through this particular, stretch of land to get where we wanted to start from. When you're relying on other people, we had boat support and a crew. You can't just get up and go. And so we had 72-hour countdowns and 24-hour countdowns. And as you said, maybe not to spoil too much, but yeah, of course there were, ups and downs.
Can you possibly explain a little bit about how kiteboarding and foil surfing work, like the technology of it?
The evolution of wind sports 101. Windsurfing came about in the 70s and kiteboarding came along in the late 90s. And kiteboarding is really a sail that you're controlling by a long set of lines. So you are flying a kite, but a very large kite. And you ride a bidirectional board that's strapped to your feet. And then hydrofoiling has been around for actually quite a long time, behind a boat. In the last probably 15 years now, the technology has improved considerably. And a hydrofoil is basically two wings, like an aeroplane, with a fuselage and a mast that's attached to the bottom of the board. But you actually, once you get the lift on the hydrofoil, you standing on the board lift up out of the water. So that's a huge advantage in wind sports, because with wind comes waves. So often it can be very choppy on the water surface, but hydrofoiling allows you to lift up above the water. And then, even though it's not in our film, but it's a great interest for, ourselves and my business, which is, in kiteboarding, and is in wing foiling, which is the fastest growing wind sport, which is kind of a little bit of a combination between windsurfing and kiteboarding.
Now that you mentioned your business, I want to give a shout out. That's White Cloud Kiteboarding. Absolutely. You are the founder, owner, rider. I would imagine you do lots of wonderful things and get to talk to a lot of folks. Tell us a little bit about how you started this business. And are you the guru when it comes to getting into winging?
Wing foiling, I can, as of this season, say that I know what I'm talking about. Like I can't profess to be a professional doing tricks, but I'm sort of in the early stages of riding waves and all that fun. So I could go back, I guess maybe 23 years. I was one of the first 4 people in Wellington to be kiteboarding here in the early days. So yeah, I've been in Wellington for a long time, and so I'm very passionate about the sport and what our location has to offer. So my history is that I actually lived in Florida and then in Chicago for a bit, and I got involved through the university, the college I went to, in the local, kiteboarding scene, college scene, and became a part of the Collegiate Kiteboarding Association.
I can only imagine all of the pre-planning. What do you do to get in shape for the physical portion of this trip?
Part of the fitness just comes from, actively doing an activity, which is what I sort of enjoy about kite foiling and water sports. Almost just like riding a bicycle to work is, fitness isn't something you have to be, actively conscious of. That said, what's different is, if you think about sailing and tacking, you're really just going back and forth. So relatively short distances. So each leg is getting a bit of a break. But with what we were doing, it was 21 kilometers from each landmass. So you really are just one leg taking the brunt one way, and then another leg. It was actually 68 kilometers in total there and back. So what I did, it was actually just a few days or weeks before we eventually attempted it. We have a harbour entrance, the Wellington harbour, and I measured out the distance, and I said, well, if I go this distance of this harbour 6 times, and I said if I do it 6 times would be 2/3 of the total distance we needed to do, then that would actually sort of give me a replication of what it would be like to do the actual thing, 2/3 of the total distance. And then you sort of push yourself on the actual game day, as they say.
Speaking of physical endurance, and of course, my next question is, how do you prepare mentally?
If you were to do this unsupported, that would be a completely different kettle of fish. Even though you might pick good weather and you'd have a very high chance of success, the downside of something going wrong would be taking emergency locator beacons, and you'd need to be calling emergency services if something happened. We sort of viewed that approach as being irresponsible. So you could actually do this just with getting sort of hobbyist support from the, recreational boat community, but we actually engaged a Phil Rush, who runs a professional service supporting swimmers to swim across. So the moment we commissioned him, our minds were sort of at ease because we were effectively outsourcing an aspect of the safety to them. But yeah, we were taking personal locator beacons, life jackets, and you even chose clothing and equipment that would be visible from a large distance should we either become separated from one of the vessels.
Can you tell us a little bit about, after your mental preparation, how you keep the concentration? Also, possibly what could break your concentration, and how do you get it back?
It's a good point because, the difference between kite foiling, which is just an aspect of kiteboarding, is when you get up onto the foil, you're actually sort of floating above the water, and you are sort of extra committed in a sense. I mean, with kiteboarding, you are committed in the sense that when you get the kite up in the air, you don't really want to disengage it, especially not in open water. I actually remember when we first left land, it was a good distance, like I would say at least sort of 15, 25 minutes into the journey, a number of kilometers, that I actually took a moment to say, hey, this is actually, we're actually sort of making some headway here, this is happening, and starting to take it in. And I guess what I'm saying is because you're so concentrated, fixated, that you don't want to, a small mistake, if you fall, that's not really a big deal, but falling does actually have some risk involved in it. If something is to go wrong with your equipment, it's a very small chance that this would happen. And maybe in one instance that would be bad, but you certainly wouldn't want to be falling and falling and falling, especially not for a long journey. So certainly remember on the way back, when you've got the endurance side and you've got, aches and the legs are burning, you really are fully focused on that. And also, keeping your eyes on your landmarks from a distance. You really need to be identifying your destination because they are large distance.
Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Justin? How did you two get together?
Yeah, we just met at the beach and we had quite a bit in common, because we're both kiteboarders and we're both originally from South Africa. So we've been friends since then. I'll just sort of add another aspect of the film is another friends of ours had been the first to kiteboard across the Cook Strait. They attempted a round trip, but, did one leg. So there's sort of always been this challenge amongst the community to say, who would be the first to go there and back. So I think we kind of had a beer with some others in 2019, and I think I can claim it because he said it. He said, I said to everyone, well, we should not only go for a round trip, we should do it on hydrofoils because it would be a more appropriate or robust tool for doing the crossing.
What does it feel like as a human to travel 23 kilometers on a board?
I think when you're just doing this, something recreationally, you're quite surprised by how many kilometers you're actually just, ticking up without thinking about it. I guess what's a bit different about, open ocean traveling is you really are, great distances. I don't know if you've been on a boat, but, something in the far distance, if you do have your angle slightly wrong, that can be the difference in, many kilometers when you actually get closer. I always sort of like to recount, I think when it's windy, you often get waves or at least a choppy surface. And then the Cook Strait is notorious, for really wild seas, which can be a combination of wind, waves, and also wind against currents. But we were, trying to get the right combination of just enough wind so that the water state wasn't that turbulent. But we did actually, the day we went, it was actually quite rough. The open water swells were over head high, if not more at times. And so that's pretty, exhilarating when you're out there. I think the deepest part of the Cook Strait is 280 meters, which is, pretty deep if you think about it. But the funniest thing that happened was at one of the deepest parts of the water, we actually hit probably a 150 meter stretch of absolute calm. And it's actually sort of illogical. And we found out later that what that was it was cold water from the bottom coming vertically up. And then when it hit the water surface, sort of dispersed. So really airy. It's good fun. I mean, if you failed a bit, you just got to stay calm because the principles are the same. The wind and the water is still there.
What is it that you've learned about yourself through the making of this film?
I think when you're working with lots of people and there's a lot to consider, you do need to, work together as a team. But that's also part of the reward. Like, I don't think the experience would be nearly as great if you did it by yourself. I think that's kind of what I enjoyed the most about this. And, it's been a really good fun project.